Feature Friday, my quilting friends. It's so great to have you guys back here with me. We are going to pick up where we left off last week. I was working on a little quilt top and we used the text feature last week on it, and this week I'm going to use the point-to-point feature. I'm filling in a long, fairly small area, and I wanted to repeat my design multiple times, but I wanted them evenly spaced out, and the quickest and easiest way I know how to do this is using my point-to-point feature. This might give you guys some ideas on how to fill in borders and sashings, so if you have a mid-level or top-of-the-line Butler Robotics system, this feature is available to you, and it hopefully spark a few ideas. I'm going to turn you guys around so you can see what we're working with and we can get started. Okay, on my display, you can see that I am in layout, highlighted here on the left-hand side, and I've got a long, thin layout box that I've created. And on my quilt top, that is this long white piece of fabric that goes across here. And what I've decided is that I want a design every 4 inches. These blocks underneath it are 8-inch blocks, so I went kind of 2 designs per block. So I want a design, a design, a design, a design. So I have went across the top of my quilt and put a little tiny mark on the middle of each of these blocks. And when I go to hit my points, I'm going to use the marks that I've put and my seams that I've put. So that's 4 inches in between my marks and my seams. So when I go for hitting my points and my point to point, that is what I'm using. I've marked my spaces where I want my designs. The other thing we need to do is double check how high our space is here, because that will affect our design. We might need to manipulate our numbers a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler and just measure this. And it is 4 inches tall. I might want to make my design a little bit shorter so that it doesn't go all the way up to the top of this. Just for the aesthetic that I want, I might make it maybe 3.5. So we're going to keep that number in mind and get started. So normally we go from layout to patterns, but when we're doing point to point, we actually go from layout to edit. So on the left-hand side of our display, we're going to highlight edit, and that is going to bring up our editing features over on the right-hand side of our display. And if we come down on the inner ribbon, our point-to-point feature is this little guy here. It looks like 2 upside-down teardrops that have dots in them, and there's a little tiny arrow that connects them together. When we highlight that, it turns orange with a white background, and we missed the message that was there. It gave me a message really quick that said, set the first point of your pattern box, but we're not ready to do that quite yet. This button here is where we're going to choose our pattern that we want to use with our point-to-point. This button with the plus sign is where we're adding our points. This button here that looks like our point-to-point icon, but there's a little teeny tiny pair of scissors on it as well. That's going to allow us to break the chain so that if we wanted to add a few point-to-points, stop that chain, move somewhere else on our quilt and start a new chain, we would use that button. And I believe that I've shown this in previous point-to-point videos, so if you're interested in that, find one of those on our Feature Friday list so that you can watch one of those. And then we've got pattern height, and it's got a height in here right now. Once we add a pattern, we'll be able to change the height. It may change automatically with the height of the design. And then we can change it how we want, because remember, the height of my white border is 4 inches. So we're going to change that. It's actually at 3.5, which is what I was talking about. So let's go ahead and open up our patterns here in our little file folder, and we can go ahead and scroll through and find our designs. I actually went and found the one I wanted. So it is this little pearl inside of a heart, and it says P2P on the end, if you guys can see that, and that is actually designed as a point-to-point design, so it's gonna work perfectly for us. So I've got it highlighted here, and I'm going to hit my check mark. And when I do that, it just loads one of the designs in kind of the upper left-hand area of our layout box. That's not where it's going to stay. It's going to move once we start adding our points. The next thing we want to do is check our pattern height. So this may be a different height than what I've got and measured. So I can always open up my pattern height, and I've got a little keypad here. So if I wanted to make it 4 inches to be the exact height of my pattern box, I could do that. But like I said, I want it a little bit shorter so it doesn't go to the full height. So I am actually going to put it at 3.5. I didn't touch on that hard enough. So I have 3.5, and I'm going to hit my check mark. So my pattern height is at 3.5. That way, when we're stitching out into here, it's only going to come up to about here. It's not going to take the full width of my border area, if that's what we're going to call it. Okay, so now it's time to start setting our points. So I am going to move my ruler out of the way because I do not want to stitch over that. And I'm going to move my machine to where my first point is going to be. And I'm going to come all the way over to the edge of my quilt. I've got a little bit of space over here, about 1/4 of an inch in, because of course I'm going to put my binding on. So I want to start my design just inside there. I'm going to line my needle up with the edge between, or the stitch in the ditch between my white fabric and my pretty mint colored fabric. And I am going to hit my plus sign to set my first point because that's where I'm starting. It now says select the next point for this pattern chain. So I'm going to move my machine to that first little blue mark. See my little blue mark there? My first little mark that I made. And that is 4 inches over from that first point. I'm then going to hit my plus sign and see what happened? It moved my heart into place and changed the size of it a little bit to be 3.5 inches tall. So now I can hop along the whole top here and mark all of my points. So I'm going to go ahead and move to where my 8-inch blocks meet here, and I'm right on the edge of my white fabric, and I'm going to mark my next point. When I do that, I get another design. I'll move over again to where my blue mark was and mark another point. And we're just going to hop along the whole quilt top on the markings that I had made and chosen for how many repeats of this I want, and we're just going to keep adding as we go across. How many you add is your decision. This is your quilt. You make it look the way you want. I just decided that that's how wide I wanted my design and how many repeats I thought a design would look nice across this. So I think it's going to look cute with these 2 little hearts sitting on top of each box. So we're getting to the end here. You can see on the screen it's filling in all of my designs nice and neat. And we've got one more to go. Okay, so now I've filled in my entire white fabric area that I've got here with all of my little heart designs. They're all going to be 3.5 inches tall, and so they're not going to come to the very top of my border. They're going to be just under. This is exactly what I had in mind in my head, so I think I'm ready to stitch out. So we are going to go to our home button. That's on the top left corner of our display. I'm going to double check that my needle is highlighted. Remember, your needle has to be highlighted so it stitches. If it's not highlighted, it's just going to trace your design. So I'm going to highlight here, and then I'm going to hit my green start button. Then we get our message that our machine is going to move to the start of our pattern block, and make sure that needle is not down in your fabric. So I'm double checking my needle. It is in the up position. So I am ready to start. I'm going to hit my green check mark, and we're going to think for a second, and my robot is taking control of my machine and moving all the way to the other end of my quilt. So we're going to start on the left, and it's going to start giving me my directions when it gets in place. So it's telling me to do a single stitch, and I'll hit my check mark. I can move out of the way to pull my bobbin thread up to the surface. Whoop. Got that. I'm going to hit my check mark. It's going to move back into place where that starting point is. I'm going to cycle my needle 3 times so I have my tie-off stitches. Hit my check mark. I can turn my long arm stitching on and then hit my check mark so my machine will start moving. So I've got my long arm stitching right here on my handlebar, so I can turn that on and hit my check mark here, and off we go. I'm going to put you guys on pause for a moment so this has time to stitch out and you don't have to listen to it go, and then we'll be back when it's all done. All right, y'all. I am done stitching, and this turned out exactly the way I hoped it would. I think let me see if I can get a long view on that. I think those little hearts are just darling. The kind of circle in the center mirrors my polka dot fabric here. The little heart hot air balloon matches with my design. I think this was a great choice. I'm so glad I put this on the quilt. And it was so easy to fill in this strip of fabric on my quilt with that point-to-point option. So if you've got it available, definitely give it a try. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I appreciate y'all following me on this quilt top journey and all of my other quilt top journeys. Until next week, thank you guys so much for joining me. Have a great day.